take care of my two little sisters. But then as we went forward, I found myself getting more and more frustrated. I found myself beaten down by the circumstances, wasn't engaged, was doing terribly at school. All of these things were kind of piling up against me. I was very fortunate when I went into high school. I went out for track cross country, and I thought I was going to do short distance because that seemed easier and you didn't have to wear shorts so short and all that stuff. So I thought that would be pretty cool for me. But as it turned out, there was this man there, and he was a tall, lanky old man, probably in his 60s. He had a balding head, wore a Hawaiian t-shirt and spandex shorts, and he pranced around the football field chasing a feather. And I thought, who is this guy? And somebody affectionately and very respectfully told me, that's Coach Calhoun. And Coach Calhoun became a father figure for me. He challenged me in running unlike any place I'd been challenged before. He pushed me forward. He had instilled in me seeds of hope and belief in myself, unlike anything anybody had ever done before that. Taught me how to deal with my struggles through running, and I became one of the top runners in the state, largely because of his support, and largely because of how he pushed me. That was the first foundation. The second foundation would have been when I was 15, and again, I wasn't doing real well in classes overall, but I did find an outlet in literature, and in English in particular, in writing. And so I had an English teacher who, for some reason, saw something in me when few other people did, a quiet kid in the back of the room. And at that time, there was a Millennium Celebration spreading across the U.S. Under the Clinton administration. And the idea was that this group would empower communities of young people to do something positive for the turn of millennium. And our group had decided, one young person had said that we should do a teen center. And another person said, yeah, and we should run it. And it all sounded fine at the time, but the adults were starting to back off. So, what do you mean run it? And the youth really took that seriously, and they really wanted to run it. Everything from painting the walls to interviewing and hiring their own adult staff. You want to see a nervous adult? Put them in front of a table full of teenagers, pen in hand, and they start to sweat a little bit. But the lesson in that was that the adults that came through it, the good adults that persevered these kinds of interviews, were the ones who we knew were committed to the young people as true partners, as true resources. So my first task after this teacher had finally forced me after 2 months to get into this program was to get sandwiches donated for a Friday night dance. Now, I know that doesn't sound like very much, but at that time, that sounded like a tremendous feat, and I was not excited about it. I was really nervous because I didn't feel like adults had listened to me. I didn't feel like I had a real important role. I was, as you know, jaded and frustrated, but they finally convinced me to go out and get these sandwiches donated for this Friday night dance, and so I go out into this grocery store, and I ask this manager for sandwiches. And sure enough, he gives me $20 worth of food to be able to bring back to this Friday night dance. I get excited about it. I thought, wow, he listened. He took me seriously. So I started going to all these other grocery stores, and I come back with just massive amounts of food for this Friday night dance, like far more than we ever could have eaten. But the group had the adults and the young people that were in this youth council. They pushed me forward. They celebrated that victory, and they were excited about it. And within a year, we served about 1,500 young people. We started seeing a lot of transformation in these youth. Youth were doing everything in these teen centers. They were running the programs, doing the budgets. They were working with these adult staff. And the Eckerd Family Foundation caught on to this, and they were really excited about it. They wanted to see youth empowerment move forward. So I went from that sandwich donating to writing a grant proposal and pushing for a grant proposal at age 16 that led to a $1.5 million success campaign. And that to build several youth centers in this model throughout the state. Then got asked to come to the White House, as Larry said, gave a talk, got involved with youth policy on a national level, and found my passion in a lot of ways to lift up other young people who were going through struggles like my sisters and me, other young people who had value, who deserved an opportunity to be heard, deserved an opportunity to play an important role in their community. And so that's how I got started in this movement. And as we look at the idea of empowerment, there are a few things that I think we should really stress. And one is that empowerment is a process. Empowerment's not something that you just hand somebody. Empowerment's not something that you just give and you expect that they'll take it. When you're talking about young people, especially young people who have been through tougher circumstances, and that's important because a lot of times in the philanthropic world, the nonprofit world, when we're talking about empowering, we're often talking about youth in traditional leadership circles. That's not bad. They deserve it. But we're also missing a lot of young people who people feel like are hopeless, who don't have a voice and who don't have a place in leadership. My argument, in my experience, and the evidence says that's not true. That all young people have an opportunity to grow, and all young people have potential to be leaders, just in their own way, and we have to meet them where they're at. And so in that, I want to bring up a few points. Now, there's a lot of literature out there that says what youth empowerment is and isn't, and they talk about the different components of the process. This kind of takes a few of those that I think are the most important, but you'll find other groups that will say something slightly different. One, I believe, is trust. If you can't trust a young person's not going to trust you. So we've got to get our foundations, we've got to get our nonprofits, we've got to get our leaders and our communities to be able to engage young people in a way that says, we trust you, we value you, we want to hear your voice. And the second is that young people want to be challenged. Sometimes we think that what young people want is just to be able to pass by. But young people actually want to be challenged. When we did a study on why young people join gangs, this was actually done by a guy named Elijah Anderson, an anthropologist. And he looked at why young people join gangs. And as it turns out, it's for a lot of the same reasons why young people will join empowerment programs. They're looking for groups that will trust them. They're looking to be challenged. They're looking to have security. They're looking to have these support and partnerships. What we need to do is provide those things that they're looking for, negative opportunities, in a healthier spectrum and in a better channel. The third thing I want to bring up is partnership. Again, this gets back to youth can't do this without adults and older youth mentors. It doesn't always have to be adults. In the case of Cause, that's the one program where we don't have any adult staff who are hired. We have all college students who receive scholarships, and they commit 20 hours a week to working with these young people, facilitating groups and empowering them. Just needs to be somebody who's going to commit to them. I once worked with an advocate in Florida, a very bright guy, and he said, I asked him, what do you think that all young people need? And I thought he was going to give me this really complicated healthcare policy solution or how to get the Florida legislature around young people. But what he said was very simple. Just said every single child needs one person who's absolutely crazy about them. Every single child needs one person who's absolutely crazy about them. And that leads into support. Young people need to be supported. If we don't provide that support, if we just put a young person on an adult board without any other young people, without any support, that's what we call tokenism. It's where we put a face on there and then we don't give it the support that face needs to be able to be of something of value and a meaningful contribution to that board, and that can often do more harm than good. And then we have safety. Young people need to feel safe. They need to know they're in a space where they're appreciated. They can ask them questions. They can ask any questions. They need to be in a place where they feel like they can provide input and not be shut down. They need to be in a place where failure is okay, that they can fail several times, but in the end, they're always going to be celebrated for what they did well and everything that they've tried. And then finally, that gets to the last point, and that's being able to celebrate young people and all the great things that they can do and their achievements. So I'm going to give an unlikely example from a recent trip to Barcelona. And I wasn't going there to volunteer or advocate or do anything like that. I was actually just, before I went to Oxford, we decided to do a couple weeks traveling Europe. And we get out of the metro station at Barcelona in the middle of the night, thinking that this town's going to be tired. We're just going to go to our hostel, call it a day. And as it turns out, when we walk out of this metro station, there are hundreds and hundreds of youth drummers banging through the streets. And the whole city is alive. And so, of course, we thought it was our grand welcome to the city. It wasn't. It happened to be their largest festival of the year. It's called La Mercè. And in La Mercè, they have, for 3 days, the city doesn't sleep. They've got all kinds of things that are going on, from drumming bands to flame throwing and fire in the streets. They've got giants that dance around and all kinds of amazing stuff. But one I want to point out today, because I feel like in a really strange way, it's very special, or it's very relevant to youth empowerment and what we're talking about in these ideas here. And it's called the Human Castle. Now, I took a video of the Human Castle when I saw it because I thought it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen. But my video is not very good, so I'm going to show you one off our beloved YouTube, and then we'll see that. It's just a couple of minutes. But as we see that, I want you to keep two things in mind. One, it's going to be children that end up crawling to the top. You'll know what that means in a second. And then, secondly, I want you to keep in mind these concepts here, and I want you to look for how those relate. And I'm going to ask for some input on what you saw and how these ideas can relate to this short video. Should say first that nobody actually got hurt in that, surprisingly, and they had an incredible cushion for that fall. And then secondly, I should say don't try that at home. But again, let's look at the concepts that we brought up for the empowerment process. Which of these concepts, if any, did you guys see in the film that we just saw?
I saw all of the items there, because you need to have the trust to climb up. You need to have the challenge to do it. You need to feel the safety that you're going to get up there, not fall. And you need to celebrate, and you need to have the support of the group.
Absolutely. Definitely. Any other thoughts? Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, as this group is going up, one of the things we don't know, or at least we can't tell from this video alone, is that these guys spend literally months and months getting ready for this and this training. I think it's incredible that they have 2 children climb to the top of that. And usually we'd say, that's ridiculous. What are you doing with these kids, right? And but how many of you, anybody read Catcher in the Rye before? A few people. Great book. I think there's one point in Catcher in the Rye, J.D. Salinger says, or he writes, you've got the older brother, and he's sitting out by the carousel. I don't know if you remember this scene. And the kid is reaching out, the younger brother, for the golden ring. And the older brother's friend is sitting there at the bench, and he says, come on, man, aren't you worried about him? He says, sometimes you just have to let the kid grab for the golden ring. Otherwise, he'll never know if he could have reached it. I think that's a great message for us and young people, and that this group supported young people in being able to get to the top and to achieve something that you've got to know is an incredible challenge. I mean, if I were those kids, I'd be scared out of my mind coming to the top of this group of people. But all of these ideas were so central to making that happen. I'd argue that it's no different in